I'll start with Ian, who I got to fly out to Newport Beach and hang out with on the red carpet for the world premiere of Archiculture. It definitely gets better and better every time I see it. So I now know that Dionysus is that guy in the class. All the architecture students laugh. But I'll start with you and ask you. So how does it? You've now went through this process for all these years. You had the world premiere at a film festival, but now you've premiered it in front of your peers. So what was that like, and kind of what's next for the film?
Yeah, so I went over briefly when I was sort of trying to entertain you guys before we had the technical difficulties, but the goal is to have conversations around this film. So for the next year, we're only doing one-off screenings. We're trying to do it at AIA chapters, AIS chapters, schools, design organizations, so that people show up to have conversations around the film. After this year, so this entire next school year until next summer, we're only doing one-off screenings. And if you're interested in doing that, get in touch with us. And then after that, the goal is to create an educational packet and like sort of a DVD that goes out to schools and gets out to high schools, and I envision like counselors, having this to be able to talk to students about, this idea of doing design as a profession, or learning more about it and watching a little bit in the classroom and having sort of a conversation themselves around it. So that's the goal. So we'll see if we do it, but I need you guys to sort of help me screen it to everybody else in the profession, to sort of make some change and some things that happen from the film.
Nice. So I'm going to pose this next question to Larry, but everybody else feel free to chime in if you think he's wrong, or I'm just joking. So it's a two-part question. Do you think architecture school is prepping students for this next generation of practice? And then the second part of it would be how do schools stay relevant now?
So actually, Design Intelligence just this week came out with a poll they had done of 2,000 architecture students, where they were assessing their satisfaction with their architectural education. And one of the questions they asked was exactly what you just asked me. Do you think your program is preparing you for what comes ahead for you? And they asked them, what do you think you're going to be doing in the future? There were 6 or 8 different things. Just for your guys' information, the top ranked school in terms of satisfaction of architecture students was Harvard. And the second ranked school was University of Texas at Austin. And to the answer to that question was, actually, although on the sort of how satisfied are you, Harvard ranked first, on that particular question, UT ranked above Harvard. 98% of the students said, this is preparing me for what I want to do in the future. At Harvard, 89% said it was preparing me for what I want to do in the future. So I do think the students feel like this is preparing, and that's a range of things. Sometimes it's architectural practice. Sometimes 7% of our students said, I want to work for a nonprofit. By the way, 0% of Harvard students thought they wanted to work for a nonprofit. So there was a range of things they wanted to do, but they felt like this was preparing them. Now, I personally, and this is sort of the second part of that question, I think we got to change a lot in architecture school, because I think we are rapidly losing our relevance. And I am incredibly critical of architectural education now. And in my own school, I'm hopefully an enormous agent for change. What is depicted in this film is anathema to me. I am not happy with that kind of culture. 2 big reasons. One is I think it has siloed us as a profession, made us a subculture that does not understand and does not interact with the larger culture. And it starts in architecture school, and it just corrupts us into our professional endeavors. And I think we need to not be this looking at our own belly button culture that just refuses to interact with all the business majors and the accountants and the, everybody else that is living on this campus, rich, amazing human beings you could interact with. And we're all focused on ourselves. And I think that's sick, and I think we ought to change that. The other thing that the other thing is, so one of the instructors there said, we're teaching them independent thinking. No, bullshit. We are not teaching independent thinking. There is so much pressure, and there is so much kind of cult-like indoctrination in architecture schools that we are not teaching people to think for themselves and to be diverse, independent thinkers. And I think for the future, we've got to interact with the bigger world, and we've got to really be independent thinkers.
Dionysus is jumping out of his seat. You have something to say?
Yeah, I mean, he's absolutely right. The academia of it is like this little bubble, this little world, and we hold it so sacred, and we don't engage others, and then we get out in the real world and we don't engage the other professionals and stuff like that. We feel as though this is like our gem and we don't want to share it. I mean, I went and felt the necessity to go to contracting, and that's what I've been doing for 5 years, and that level of interaction. I will say that one thing I did pull away is the fact that it's not a right or wrong, it's not a yes or a no, it's about problem resolution, and that essence of it has for me proven very beneficial in the field, in talking with the trades and working it out with the guy who always likes to remind me that he's been doing this longer than I've been alive. But if we don't, all the time, but if we don't engage them and we don't understand that process of it, then we will continue to be very disconnected in the world. And I think that's one of the biggest things that I noticed when I went into the professional world, and why after about 6 months a year I felt the necessity to go to what most professors told me was the dark side, and give myself a timeline and learn what I can, but then get out. And without those other entities, without those other consultants and the builders themselves and the tradesmen themselves, we can't execute what it is that we want to do. You know, we can live in this academia and in this paper world, but we need to step away from a service industry and start to engage and be more concerned with the built product. I feel as though sometimes I still relate as an architect, and I feel like the architects on my job have left me out to dry some days. You know, they don't want to come on site, and I understand the liability and things like that, but if we don't break out of our little bubble and engage other professionals, then we'll always hold that thing sacred, and we'll fail in the real world, and we've become obsolete.
So you guys both brought up this topic of engagement, and really you're touching on the diversity of practice. We're coming out of this huge recession where you know, a lot of interns and young architects were laid off. There was no, do you want to be laid off? It was like, no, you're done. And we see a lot of people going out and doing different things. So I'll turn it to Mark right now, and you can start with this one, and I'll say, you know, what do you think entrepreneurialism is going to mean for architecture in the future, and how do you think, or how do you see young people coming out and being more entrepreneurial in their careers?
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to first start and say that I think construction should be a mandatory requirement for architects.
He's on.
I don't know if your mic is.
It is
on. He's on.
I'm on.
Okay, there you go.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Well, I think construction experience, on-site construction experience, should be a requirement for architecture license. I think having field experience is critical to the success of what we do. But to answer your question, I think the economy that we're coming out of is almost forcing students to think entrepreneurially. One of the things that really reminded me of architecture school, and as a professional now, you kind of lose that, is the optimism and the enthusiasm and the passion that students have. And I think that is the heart of entrepreneurism. And I think if we don't lose that as professionals, we'll be so much better off. And when I saw the young woman talk about how she wants to go out and do her own work and get licensed, you know, a few years ago that sounded crazy, but today that's actually possible. With the internet and the tools we have, that can actually happen. You can go start a business, build your own business, start designing things. You could even go out and hire licensed architects to work for you, to get your IDP, and get licensed in your own company. It's possible today. It wasn't possible years ago, but it's possible today. So I think that's
Anybody else want to touch on it?
Well, I mean, can you hear me though?
Yeah.
Just want to make sure. Some really great point that you had touched on before, and talking about the necessity to be involved in the construction side after you're graduated, right, and you're on your way to do IDP. I mean, we were having a discussion about making that taste a little bit more emphasized while you're in school. You know, we talked about, you know, you start to change your way of thinking in first year. You then mature that into your second year, and then maybe we take a break from design, right? And we go back into what really makes things work. And with that taste, right, you come out, Let's say you hold on to your ambition, you hold on to your optimism, but now you have another level of understanding what you're actually putting together, right? The tangible assembly. I think that will allow you to then succeed in your construction endeavors that come afterwards, and then when you're done with that, you're so much more hireable. You're more desirable as as a new young worker. I think that really will, complete you as a whole.
So I just want to break in on just a little bit of, I love having construction experience. I think that's really important for some people in some roles.
That's the answer I get all the time.
am so not into IDP, where everybody's checking a little box and trying to do exactly the same thing.
I'm not a big fan of
It's an
IDP
incredibly diverse field. There are thousands of roles to play. You don't have to be trained the same way to do everything. You should be training yourself to do what you want to do.
Yeah.
And some people should do construction, and some people should never set foot on a construction site because what they're doing really doesn't have anything to do with construction. And there are roles in architecture that's fine. If I'm going to be in programming, probably better to do social services for a year than to do a construction site. So I think we need to accept the breadth of our field and understand that people are going to have really different experiences and not try to freaking funnel everybody through this, not only in the schools, but also in IDP and in the licensure process, this kind of very artificial strategy.
Let me ask you all a question actually then, because the average internship lasts 8 years. This is not me talking, this is NCARB. Which to me is profoundly criminal, right? I mean, that's hurting the individual who's taking that long, and it's hurting the profession because it's led to a pretty tremendous attrition rate, right? And I look with intense envy to the legal profession, right? And someone taking the bar immediately after graduation with the assumption, no, you're not, after you pass the bar, going to go, defend a proposition in front of the Supreme Court. Like, we get that, but we've raised the bar, the barrier to access. I find it profoundly insulting that someone with a master's degree, and this is a little bit of just language, but it's called an intern, for God's sake, right? And that's not to minimize the absolute value of licensure. That's not to say we should value that less, but that the tent, as you point out, Larry, is so much broader than we're allowing it to be, needs to be so much broader.
And Ned, you bring up a good point. I always compare it to the medical profession. I have a friend who just graduated from medical school, and he's not going to go into brain surgery tomorrow.
Yeah.
He's a physician, but the license isn't saying you can do all things medical. The license is saying you know what you know, and you know when you need to collaborate, when you need to bring in someone else. And I think the architectural license is very similar. Did you graduate and think, I'm going to go build the Burj Khalifa?
Right.
No, but see, and if you did bite that off, you would know you need to bring in consultants and a team of 1,000, and
absolutely.
And you would have probably done it better. You wouldn't have the porta potty people coming in to pump out the stuff every morning. That really happens. So I'm going to turn to the audience now and see if somebody has a question. Brent has a question. I'm sure. The hand over there went up first, and then we'll go here. Wait, so I'll get you next. Sorry.
I was just going to ask if you have any comments on architectural education and how many schools are abandoning the 5-year BArch for a master's.
Was that for anybody in specific or just everybody?
I'm not sure how I feel about it. I'm a 3-year master's. My daughter's a 5-year BArch, but there were less and less schools she could apply to wanting to be an architect at 18.
So I can speak to that because at University of Texas we have a 5-year BArch, we have a 4-year BS in architecture, we have a 4+2 MArch, we have a 3.5-year MArch after doing an undergraduate degree in something else. We have PhDs, we have MSs in sustainable design, and we have MAs in architectural history. I mean, we got all those different degrees. And we need all those different degrees because there's a lot of different ways to enter the field at different stages of your life. There are a lot of different ways you want to study and things you want to study. And I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all. So I'm extremely distraught at the idea of, well, we need to standardize our degree programs. We need to phase out the BR. That's ridiculous. And we need to keep the diversity and the range of ways to get into the field and possibilities. And that includes, by the way, community college for a couple of years in architecture programs in community colleges that then can segue into an accredited school of architecture. And we have 4 in Texas that are currently doing that. And that means we're getting a much more diverse group of students. We are finally getting over that barrier of it being privileged kids. So it has to be all of the above as far as I'm concerned.
It's right here behind David.
Great.
I just wanted to ask about the 8-year, to licensure. I find that extremely frustrating. And there's other countries, I know specifically China, you can take an exam. Hello? You can't build the Burj Khalifa, but you can build something that's up to 3,000 square feet or something. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering if anyone's talking about that in the U.S.?
I should mention, I think it's too easy to vilify an organization like NCARB during a conversation like this. And there was an announcement that you're like, please vilify them. No, but they just announced this week, not the regulations behind, but the intent to establish a new version of the licensure requirements. So it's, we're on version 4.0, and I think they're basically saying we are now embarking upon the process to establish what 5.0 is. And we're at a really critical moment. I had lunch with Michael Armstrong, who's the head of NCARB, about a month ago, and he and the NCARB board, I think, are like super profoundly aware of what's broken in the system. Whether or not they arrive at the right solution is ultimately up to us, right? Because they can just go off and do it as a little subgroup that thinks they know how to fix things, or we can kind of, as a community, engage them in dialogue and steer them toward what seems to make most sense for most people.
Yeah, I mean, you touched on it with the spectrum of avenues that the architect can go, or from an entrepreneurship, and the IDP and NCARB doesn't give that option. I struggle 5 years now to figure out how to file my hours. I have none, because there's no licensed professional in my firm. The company is licensed, but there's no licensed professional in the firm, and yet the exposure that you get for an entrepreneur is going out and cultivating with other professionals and potentially coming up with the new patent or the new building system that revolutionizes it, and yet IDP and NCARB doesn't want to accept that. They're still very structured in what they want to do. So there has to be a broader range of it, and hopefully that's the approach they're going to take.
Yeah, on the bright side of it, I'm not really on the panel, but I sit on the 5 Presidents Council, so I think I have a unique insight into what's happening. They are engaging the other collaterals in that conversation for how it's going to change and how it's going to happen. And I think for the first time in probably 30 years, you're hearing things in that room like, how do we get to a point, not tomorrow, nobody get excited, how do we get to a point of like licensure upon graduation? Like that's an idea that's being floated in that room now, and it might take 10 years or whatever. How slow can you move an iceberg? The fact that they're saying things like that, and moving towards like, hey, what would it take? How can we, not retest? All of us take that horrible structures final, and then we have to go take that joke of a structures exam for ARE. It's like, why did I even have to pay for this, right? But so they're looking at things like that, and they're very conscious of it, and I think they have the best of intentions at heart right now.
So I'm actually chairing a task force that was put together by the Large States Roundtable of AIA large state chapters. It's a state issue because state licensure is done at the state level. And I have had extensive conversation with Mike Armstrong, the executive director, and with Ron Blitch, who's the president. And I have heard their sketch of what 5.0 looks like. And I'll have to say I'm not encouraged at all.
That's not good news.
I think we need to do more than suggest to NCRB, we need you to rethink this. We need to take a much stronger hand in saying, well, maybe there's an alternative way to do licensure. Maybe AIA needs to play a larger role in path to licensure. NCRB broke off from AIA many years ago. Why we have two organizations, I have no idea. It's completely counterproductive.
Amen.
It should be one organization, and it's not served us well at all. And so I think there may be something more fundamental than just 5.0.
Yeah.
I think we need, start from scratch, how the hell do we
Well, would you say then that it would be a possibility to do different types of architectural licensure?
Exactly.
Right? There's not just one architectural license.
Yes.
Right.
And they're going to take a certain avenue.
There may well also, I mean, as a medical profession, as a legal profession, that you get a basic, what they call in law, black letter law. That, you know, you just know the basics and you get to be a lawyer. And then after that, you can get certified to do all kinds of other things. You can do family practice, you can do tax law, you can do. So in the same way in medical profession. And we are losing market share to other organizations like USGBC or like who have then taken on, okay, I'm going to certify your specific expertise. Right. And we've sort of ignored that and at our peril. So I think there's a way, we just got to rethink the whole freaking thing.
Mark, you saying?
Yeah, I was just going to, while Larry was talking, I had a podcast with Ian, and that was one of the things we were talking about, is wouldn't it be great if you actually focused on the thing that you're passionate about in the little field, you know, in the large field of architecture, that one piece that you really love and are good at, and you can just focus on that track and become an architect in that specialty. And then, you know, maybe construction, and you love construction, you want to be out there and build, you go and you become a construction architect. You know, if there's different paths to become an architect, all different types of architect, I think that would be really, really great. You know, I also, that the encouragement or the passion and the optimism, I mean, if we want to know where it's going, it's being crushed in IDP. I mean, that's where, by the time you're outside of IDP, when you're done, you get your license, hey, great, and you know, all the negativity and pessimism fills in where optimism was, so, yeah.
Okay, we have another one over here.
After watching this film and after hearing your comments, I want to take the discussion in a different direction. I'm actually really interested in the responses you've gotten from the general public and relevant industries from the film.
Well, so this is the second screening that's ever happened. So the first one was at a film festival, and most of the crowd there was design oriented. So, you know, when you watch it, the language is set up in a way that you can show it. I always use like the my mom test. Like my mom in Ohio, can she watch this and understand it? So we, you know, consciously stripped out the architectural sort of babble. You know, and I see this as a way that students and people can sort of say, oh, this is what it was like going into design school. You can actually see what the studio was like now.
Brought back a lot of memories.
Yeah, and for those that have done it, and you know, maybe you did it 20 years ago, you can sort of, go into some sort of time warp and, you know, see what it's like today. But, you know, engaging the broader public with the film is sort of like step two. Our core is this and these conversations. Just from being here, you know, yesterday, it's sort of like, oh, wait, we've got to figure out a way to take these conversations and put them into the website and figure out some sort of way to like get them back out. Yeah. You know, so we can like pull these conversations of what are the topics, what are sort of the ways of doing that, and like the things that you're talking about, you know, the 5.0 and re-envisioning it, how does that happen? You know, I mean, you guys are operating at certain levels because you're inside, but the people sitting in the audience, the students that are going to be watching this film, you know, how do the grassroots change that? It sounds like is needed to have that.
I found myself watching the film desperately wishing I could understand it from a non-insider's perspective. Yeah. You know what I mean? Because I have no idea. I trust you. I mean, I've commissioned film from you, so I'm biased, but I'm glad to hear that was so very much in the forefront of your minds, you know, as you were making it.
It was actually really funny at the Archiculture premiere. This guy stands up in the crowd and he goes, you know, you make it seem so rigorous, and I wonder if you want to show the other side of it. And I was just like, what other side? I'm like, you're not an architect, are you? So we'll move over to David.
I'm David Zog, and I'm one of I'm on the national board as a public director. So we have two board directors, I believe, in the room. We'd really like all of them to have seen this. But I don't know about you, I saw this amazing speaker this morning named Cameron Sinclair, and he's doing this awesome stuff, and he kept referring to doing architecture, and then I went downstairs afterwards, and I said, I'll give you $100 to your booth. I'll give you the $100 for the day, if you would answer my question, does he have a license?
He does not. I know that. Yeah.
No.
So what I want to know is, I mean, he's a loser because he's not licensed. And he's doing all this amazing work, and he brought a room of thousands of people to their feet, inspired. What are we doing in architectural education to bring more of that, but also with a practical bent? Because I don't find many architectural schools teaching entrepreneurism. They all want to do good, they want to do well while they're doing good.
Amen.
Not a question there, but have some comments.
So I
gentlemen.
definitely want to dive into that one. One of the great things that the economic downturn did was that just a whole lot of people went out of architecture school and said, why do I need a profession? Why do I need a firm? Why do I need a license? I know how to do this. I chaired the solar decathlon project. We built a freaking house and dismantled it and took it to Washington, D.C. and brought it back to Texas, and it was zero net energy. I can do this. I don't need any of that structure. And they did. And there's a whole bunch of those entrepreneurial firms in Austin, in Texas, of our former students that are just doing amazing things. Really, really cool, amazing things. And they had all the skills right out of school.
I was lucky enough to be part of the team that curated last year's American Pavilion at the Biennale. And yeah, that's an architecture biennale. And what was really interesting to me about the premise that the kind of lead, the commissioner of the pavilion, Kathy Ho, put together is that it was entirely about activist placemaking. There was no limitation or no even understanding that the work that was going to be presented was created by an architect, created by a firm, but then instead there was an open call for submissions. Hundreds of entries came in, and about 124 projects were shown by artists, by community groups, yes, by architects, but by graphic designers, people who had no connection with architecture whatsoever, all of whom were practicing at the end of the day what is architecture, right? And when we talk about our kind of minimized market share, we can either own that broadening of perspective and inclusion, or we can kind of narrow ourselves to the point where we're completely irrelevant, right? And I'm personally on the side of bigger tent.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, I think what you said over here about architects who may not be licensed and going out there and doing things, I think they're still architects. And I think there's a stigma against architects who may not be licensed, or architects who were licensed and left the profession, and that they're no longer architects. I don't believe that. I believe once you go through that rigorous education, you're an architect, whether you become licensed or not. And I think that when you go and you become a fashion designer or a graphic designer, or you take the education that you've learned in the architecture school and apply it to something and make the world a better place, you're still an architect.
So, quick insert here.
Yeah.
Maya Small is an architect out of Providence, Rhode Island, and she has a Tumblr list called Architects of Other Things. And these are people who trained as architect and maybe even got licensed, but are out there doing other things, and it's everybody from Weird Al Yankovic, Courtney Cox, and
David Byrne.
Yeah,
David Byrne.
Saad Shahab, who is the president of Chrysler. But according to our view, they're not legitimate.
They should be.
And I'm all for licensing.
Yeah.
But there is a bigger world.
They're out there
What
making
you're
the world
saying
a
is
better
that
place.
bigger world is that's what we got to fight for.
Yeah.
Amen.
We'll go over here.
First, I want to say to Mark how grateful I am to have caught the end of your speech on the hall today, because I've been saying the same thing for 40 years. I'm one of the first people I ever knew about that got an MBA after graduating architecture school and after being out and working for 5 years. Now, I question to you, Larry, why is it every dean I talk to would rather have a professor who had a background in basket weaving, and I'm not exaggerating, they'd rather have an art background in a master's than to have an entrepreneurial background, which has served me very, very well. And I know part of it is, for you young guys, it's the accrediting board that really denigrates an MBA degree. Why?
So I can tell you as a former dean who also has a business degree, Sloan School, MIT, 1972, that there are a lot of us that are on the same page with you. And I do think that, and there are plenty of people who say, why don't architecture schools require more business classes? Why don't you have to have, business? I'm back on the same page of, if you're interested in business as an architecture student, freaking go out there and take some classes and learn it and get a degree if you want to, like I did. But if you don't want to be interested in that, not everybody has to be interested in that. And, there are other ways for other people.
Yeah, but I think...
At a major university who will not let the architecture students even take business electives.
Well, that is bullshit.
Well, I'd have to tell you, at Pratt, the fact that it was an art school and you had other options of interdisciplines, you had to draw a line. You had to cut away from the architectural electives when you had to go out. I mean, I took metal, machining that thesis year. I was taking machining, mill and lathe. I had taken metal, forging and welding and fabrication, wood shop, photo classes. A lot of my friends were graphic designers, industrial designers, photo majors, but you had to go seek it. You very easily got sucked into that studio culture, and that was your bubble. And John Carl will tell you, I made a point to reach out to as many other friends, and a lot of my core friends at Pratt were not architecture majors, and I sought out those other trades and those other classes, and that was what inspired me to say I need to take a step and take what IDP and most would consider an unorthodox approach to absorb as much as I could in the process of making and fabrication and that. But some schools don't promote it, and the curriculum is, as we said originally, archiculture. They don't want you to branch out. Just that's your life.
I think it goes farther than encouraging the students to do that. It's encouraging the faculty to do that.
Yes.
And actually, during the period that I was dean, one of the things I just pushed and pushed and pushed was, where are the people elsewhere on this campus doing sustainability? You have to connect with them. You can't just do architecture sustainability. We're the biologists, we're the people in public policy. You've got to connect to them. Your research is irrelevant if you don't hook it into a larger framework. If you're interested in theory, who are the people in philosophy that are going to be your colleagues and that will help you understand sociology, anthropology, whatever. I mean, you're on a rich campus there. It's stupid if you have a faculty that are only talking to each other. They've got to get out. When they get out, and then they can tell the students, there's this amazing anthropology course. You're interested in that. It's relevant to architecture. You need to take this class. Right. And that then begins to be a real architectural education because it's inherently multidisciplinary.
Yes.
It is not a singular discipline.
Okay, so we're already over. I think we're going to go for 2 more questions. I have one in the back over here and one over here, and then I think we're going to cut it off so everybody can get to their next session.
Yeah.
There is a happy hour at the Virtue Professional Lounge. Some of these guys might be ask questions.
Happy hour. I'll be there.
I'll be there.
Yeah, for happy hour.
Okay, and who's going to be at happy hour?
We can do happy hour.
Yeah, I'll be there.
We could just all move up there.
Yeah, okay, so back here.
Hi, Ian, I just wanted to say thanks for all of your work for over, however many years and your entire team. I couldn't help but notice that your panel is all male, which
Yes.
I just wanted to call that out and speak a little bit, or not really speak, but ask the question. I mean, obviously, architecture has been a very male-dominated profession for its entire existence. But now in architecture school, the ratio is roughly 50-50. So, but there are lots of articles and there's a lot of buzz around about recognition of women and leadership roles and how there's there's obviously still a glass ceiling. So I just wanted someone to address that a little bit. So.
But let's take it. I'll make a comment. First of all, I don't think Ian set the panel. Somebody else did.
Yeah. So, no, I'm not judging. I'm just observation.
You're playing somebody else. I just don't want him to get
come.
Okay.
We're all sharing a room.
I think a very critical part of getting women back into the profession is to look at the structure of our architecture firms and the way that they are so rigid and the way they've been practicing. I think we need to look beyond the way we've been practicing traditionally all these years and look at flexible business hours or no business hours at all, and let architects work when they need to work. Because when you do that, you create a balance between the firm and the family. My firm, I have a small firm. My wife and I are architects. We have 3 kids. We've got a bunch of animals. We're really, really busy. I have a full-time architecture firm and I do this blog. I don't sleep. But the flexible hours that firms that have this structure of open operating hours allow women to work when they want to work and when they can work. My wife works at night and weekends, and because she's a full-time mom too, but she's also a full-time architect. So that, because we have our own firm, we can do that. But other firms should be doing that too, and then you'll be able to allow more women to come back to the profession.
I also think it's just a matter of time.
I agree.
I look at my generation and the next generation after that, and we just don't look at diversity the same way that our parents did. It's like, I always use the example, I'm out on campus one day during the first time Obama got elected, and I'm not part of the crowd on either side. I'm just kind of walking to class, and this guy grabs my shoulders literally, and he's like, "Obama's a Muslim." And I'm just like, who gives a shit? I just keep walking, I'm like, because that's just how our generation thinks, and it's kind of the same thing. It's like, my grandfather might have said, "You're going to hire a woman," and I'd be like, "What are you, a caveman?" Like, so we don't see it the same way. I know in my studio, it's like, I mean, we just respected each other so much for the work that we do that I'd be like the first person to kick someone in the butt if they tried to like not hire one of the females in my class. So I think it is a matter of time. I'm hoping.
Yeah, I mean,
right
if you look at how women enter the profession, I think when you have 50-50 graduating, 50-50 are entering the profession, and then something along the line happens, and a lot of times that's family. Women have children, and they go and they want to be mothers, and so they become mothers, and a lot of times they're not welcomed back into the profession because the structure of the professions don't allow it. So the structure of the professions have to change, or the firms.
So I'm not
as
easy with this notion that it's going to solve itself, because we've been 50% women for 20 years. This is not new, and yet when I go to an organization like this, I see my male students, former students. I don't see so many of the former students who are females. And that's really distressing because the women were better than the guys. But I think it's going to take work. I don't think it's going to just happen. I think we're going to have to destroy some of those barriers, and I think also we're going to have to make standing up in front of a group of people, asking them to spend $300 million on this design we just did. That's going to have to be something we see a woman in our head doing that, instead of we seeing a guy in our head doing that. And this is really unconscious, but there still is a prejudice out there.
But my point, and I'm gonna kind of disagree a little bit here, is that me and people younger than me do see a woman giving that presentation.
Well, then I want to know why they aren't up there doing it.
It isn't even a question. I think we're just waiting for some people that are a little too old to retire. So we'll go to you.
The next generation.
Actually, I am the biggest loser in this room. I structural engineering with an emphasis in art. I studied architecture for 2 years. For the life of me, I don't know why I chose that, but the only way I figured that I'm going to be an architect, because I'm going through the IDP, and I think it's very ridiculous. I still have about 500 hours left, or something like that. It's not that much, but compared to when I started, it was really disgusting. But I do have another test that I've taken, and I guess it goes to the gentleman in the plaid shirt. I took a...
Hold it close.
It's called the Fundamental of Engineering, and if you went into engineering, I figured that that's the only way you're going to become a successful architect. But my true question is, there was a question that was asked by one of the professors in your movie.
Yeah.
And he says, what is the task for an architect when he graduates out of college? What is that true task? It's not building out of Frank Gehry. It's not becoming Frank Lloyd Wright. You know, heck, there's Legorreta and Barragán, who are structural engineers, came to this country and designed even the most megalithic parks that we have in the country. I mean, you can go around and observe them yourself. But I wanted to know if you were going to actually incorporate all this very diverse discussion, especially there was a young woman who stood up and says that you actually have a panel of 100% male. Don't you think that maybe even just a bit of diversity, like the dean is suggesting, is that we have to break those barriers, open up to new thought, and maybe put in a word for architectural students to pursue construction, pursue maybe if it's fashion design or interior design or basket weaving. I don't know, I heard basket
film.
weaving. Or film,
yeah.
Right? Because I had lunch with a very big loser today, and he described architecture as a means to problem solving. And I don't think there's anybody here in this world that can actually do better problem solving than architects. So I wanted to know if you're going to actually incorporate all of that discussion in maybe a little bit more of your website, or maybe in your movie?
Yeah. I mean, that's, it's up to you guys to make the change. The film is sort of, I see it as the hook to get people to come together to have these conversations. There's a lot of topics to cover in there, but I mean, we were very conscious while shooting it to have diversity in race and gender in the film. That's not represented by the panel completely, but...
I'm gay.
Does that count? These guys are, yeah, so I mean, there's diversity in the film. I think that, the comment that for the past, 20 years, whatever, the education has been 50-50, but the profession is not. And so it's the profession that needs to take the change. The schools have been pretty balanced gender-wise. Race-wise, I have no idea. I'm not sure what the schools are like, but obviously, it's an issue that I've heard a lot around the AIA. That for the profession to respond to the changing landscape of the people in the United States, you have to have the diversity in the design process, because a female is going to look at a design process differently than a male is. It's sort of embedded in us. There's different ways of looking at the family life, that different cultures are going to be doing it, and how they're going to use the space. So you need that in the design room to understand it intuitively as it's embedded in your design. So
yeah, and I think hopefully we keep discussing the same idea of expansion and opening that up to other areas. And structural engineer, for example. I mean, I'm working on a house for my parents in Greece, and the architect, if you will, is actually what they call the mechaniko, the building mechanic. He's an MEP and a structural engineer, but because of his passions in the arts and in architecture, he's able to function on the island as basically an architect and see it from design conception all the way through construction. I mean, this gentleman goes and does his controlled inspections of the rebar, but he says, and he told me this very adamantly, that to do it that way, it's a poor and lonely position, that it's not, don't expect praise from it, that to take on as much of that responsibility and liability and then take into account the creative passion of it as what we do as architects to offer the experiential in a building, that's a risk-reward thing. And it took him decades to get to a point where he was the go-to mecanico on the island, the building mechanic, which is, it's a different thought process there. And hopefully, we evolve here in the U.S. as well to take that on.
All right, so we're going to go to Mark, and then I'll go to Kyle.
I just have one thing. I think it's up to you. I think it's up to you and you and you. I am tired of waiting for the AIA to fix my problems. I'm tired of the schools to fix my problems. I'm just a kid from New Jersey. I'm sitting here because I decided to stand up and start talking about business and architecture. That's how I got here. I started talking about it. Kyle met me. Kyle asked me to be on the panel. I'm getting my word out there. It's up to you to get up. And if you have a passion and you have a message to give, if any of you do, you have to get up and start talking about it, because the profession's not going to fix it. They're way too big. Way too big. They're not going to ever fix it. The schools are not going to ever fix it. If we want the profession to change, we all need to fix it ourselves.
Kyle?
Okay, we are going to have to wrap up. I do want you guys to ask questions to them after the fact if you want to. I should admit that I am the biggest loser of all. I am the guy who set up the panel here. But I would say, part of that is, okay, if you just return my emails, you could be on the panel too. So it's not that the invites didn't necessarily go out, they just couldn't make it. And by the way, Ian was trying to get some of the women from the film, but one of them is in Europe and one of them couldn't make it. So the intention is good. So, and we do have a Greek right, on the panel.
There we go.
That's something.
I was hoping there'd be like a Dorothy Michaels kind of Tootsie moment, where one of you guys would just be like, I am a woman, but yeah.
I was really tempted. I was really tempted.
I was born.
Anyway, this has been a great discussion, and you know, as the head of marketing for the AIA, I'm really proud that we've lent our support to the film, and I hope all of you will go back to your components, to your schools, spread the word, try to get the film out there and have more discussions about this, because as I think we'd all agree, it is definitely fodder for some very rich discussions, and I think it's all good.
Yeah,
Awesome. Thank you.
One last quick plug. If you want to get emailed after this, I'm going to be standing in this back corner with the little scanner thingy, and you guys can get emailed when it comes nearby you, or if you can let me know if you want to get contacted to try to do a screening where you're at. Thanks for watching, guys.